Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate International. We're going to be taking a look at Egypt intensifying its efforts to end the violence, obviously, in Gaza, trying to limit the escalation that is taking place there, that has been taking place for a few days now. Now, before we start our topic for tonight, let's check out some of the latest stories making the news today. We'll start off with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who held a meeting with the Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, the Governor of the Central Bank Hassan Abdullah, Minister of Planning and Economic Development Hala Said, and Minister of Finance Mohammed Maid on Tuesday. Presidential spokesman Ahmed Fahmy said President al-Sisi reviewed the latest indicators of overall performance of Egypt's economy and the implementation of an initiative to reduce the basic commodity prices. President al-Sisi was also briefed on the most important economic targets and cooperation efforts with various internal financial institutions in this regard. The head of state directed to strengthen reforms related to financial and monetary policies and maximize the role of the private sector in the development process. This comes within the framework of the state's ongoing efforts to improve the overall indicators of the economy. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli stressed today on the significance of Egypt's pivotal role amid the Gaza war. Now, at the cabinet meeting at the new administrative capital, Madbouli referred to the expanded international participation in the Cairo Summit for Peace hosted by Egypt, as well as Cairo's efforts to guarantee that humanitarian and medical aid reach Gaza. The Prime Minister reviewed the outcome of his visit to China on behalf of President al-Sisi to attend the Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation, which witnessed the signing of crucial agreements in development fields, as well as his meetings with heads and representatives of big Chinese firms and key international finance institutions. On another track, the Prime Minister asserted that the government in the coming stage would empower the private sector in fields focusing on localizing industry as one of the national targets. Madbouli also probed the executive position of an initiative aimed at reducing prices of key commodities. Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri took part in a UN Security Council ministerial session over the latest developments in the Middle East today. Shukri reviewed Cairo's vision and assessment of the dangerous military escalation in Gaza. He called for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, as well as an end to the Israeli siege. The top diplomat reviewed efforts to provide protection for Palestinian civilians in Gaza and allow the entry of humanitarian aid in a sustainable manner. On the sidelines of the session, the Arab foreign ministers held a joint press conference to reveal the Arab position regarding the current Gaza conflict. Head of Egypt's State's Information Service, Dia Rashwan, held an international press conference today to clarify Egypt's position on the ongoing war in Gaza. During the conference, which was attended by representatives of foreign and Egyptian media, Rashwan affirmed that Egypt had not abandoned the Palestinian cause since the latest escalation had begun. He noted that Egypt had warned last December of the deteriorating situation in the occupied Palestinian territories due to the Israeli aggression. Rashwan further reiterated that Egypt views that the Palestinian cause should be settled in accordance with international legitimacy, UN resolutions and negotiations, which called on a two-state solution with Jerusalem as the Palestinian capital. He said Egypt called last April in a joint statement with France, Germany and Jordan for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. According to Rashwan, Egypt later in May had condemned the Israeli aggression in the occupied Palestinian territories, especially after settlers stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque. He noted that Egypt's constant position towards the Palestinian cause during the past 75 years had been confirmed by President al-Sisi at various occasions, who labelled it the cause of causes, which would never die. And aid and relief materials continue entering from Egypt into the Gaza Strip through the Rafah border crossing. A third new convoy of 20 trucks entered into the Strip carrying water, medical needs, food, including 9 trucks affiliated to the Egyptian Red Crescent and 6 others affiliated to the Egyptian Food Bank. Meanwhile, dozens of trucks carrying thousands of tons of international relief aids heading to Gaza are lined in front of the Rafah border crossing or in El Arish, northern Sinai. Earlier, 37 trucks entered Gaza during the previous 2 days. These were some of the stories making the news today, but now turning our attention to tonight's topic. Let's check out this report regarding the summit for peace that was held in Cairo a few days ago, and we'll be also focusing on the suggested roadmap for peace and negotiations suggested by Egypt. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
In an impassioned address to the Cairo Summit for Peace, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi reaffirmed Egypt's unwavering support for the Palestinian cause and proposed a roadmap to end the current humanitarian crisis in Gaza and revive the path for peace. Addressing leaders from more than a dozen Arab and Western countries and representatives of the European Union and various international organizations attending the summit that was called by Egypt earlier this last week to discuss ways to de-escalate the war in Gaza. President al-Sisi criticized the inequality and double standards in dealing with the loss of human lives. He said Egypt condemns the clearest terms the targeting, killing and intimidation of all peaceful civilians. At the same time, Egypt expresses its deep shock that the world is standing by idly while a catastrophic humanitarian crisis unfolds. The president emphasized that these practices include collective punishment, blockade, starvation, and pressure towards forced displacement, run counter to the principle of international law and the agreements established by the civilized world to prevent such actions. The head of state reiterated that Cairo categorically rejects the displacement of Palestinians from the land under any circumstance, stressing that the liquidation of the Palestinian cause without solution is beyond the realm of possibility and in all cases it will never happen at the expense of Egypt. The president further asked, isn't it high time to address the root cause of the Middle East problem? Hasn't the moment arrived to dispel the political illusion that the status quo can be sustained? He stressed that the only solution for the Palestinian cause is the achievement for justice through a fair and equitable resolution that upholds the rights and aspirations of the Palestinian people. President al-Sisi emphasized the need to prevent the conflict which broke out on October 7th from escalating further and jeopardizing regional stability and global peace and security, extending an invitation to the world community to work collectively on a specific roadmap which begins with ensuring full, safe, unfettered and sustainable flow of humanitarian aid and relief to the Gaza people, followed by immediate negotiations to achieve calm. Subsequently, he stressed that discussions on reviving the peace process should commence to implement the two-state solution and establish an independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital, living alongside Israel based on the international legitimacy resolutions. The president added that this plan should occur concurrently with efforts to strengthen the Palestinian Authority to fully assume its duties in the Palestinian territories. President al-Sisi noted that Egypt has never closed the Rafah border crossing from Sinai to Gaza, saying the crossing was bombed on the Palestinian side by Israel, thus preventing aid from reaching the Strip. He revealed an agreement reached with the United States regarding a sustainable opening of the Rafah border crossing under the supervision of the UN. He said this proposal aims to allow the vital humanitarian aid to reach the people of Gaza.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here tonight in the studio by Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister and our former Ambassador in Cameroon. Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Ambassador, now, obviously the situation has been escalating day by day since the 7th days by the day. Now, before we start delving into the details and the nitty-gritty of all these escalations, be it military escalations or political escalations as well, we keep hearing the phrase that the war in Gaza constitutes not only danger for the Palestinians and the Gazans, but also the whole region. Now, everybody understands the dangers that the whole situation can pose for Egypt. But what about the whole region? How can you explain the domino sort of effect of the escalation of violence and instability, not just for Gaza, the Gaza Strip and Egypt, but also for the whole region?
Well, we'll start first with Egypt, of course. And in this regard, I have to once again mention that I am really grateful, and all Egyptians are grateful to President Sisi, because he made it clear that Egypt will not be the safe haven that people are thinking can be accepting having all the Gazans. And unfortunately, there are some reports coming either from Israel or even from the United States that this is still an option. And I think, although I am not official anymore, as you just mentioned, I was a former ambassador, but I can speak for all Egyptians when we say that this is not an option for any Egyptian to accept having the Gazans here. This problem has to be solved where it is, in Gaza and in Israel. It cannot be solved in Egypt. This is not the way to solve it. To solve it is to resume the peace talks. God knows when, but it must be resumed, because this is the only solution. And this will lead us to the second party who is actually expecting a result from what you just mentioned, which is Israel. If Israel is really seeking peace, the only way is by ending the occupation. I mean, unfortunately, in all the media, especially in the West, it's as if history started the 7th of October, when Hamas movement or the resistance movement launched an attack on Israel colonies. And since that day, everybody is talking. I mean, it's like this is when it started. Actually, it started long before that. It started with the occupation. And we can say, honestly, that this would not have happened. Even the existence of the movement itself, of Hamas or else, would not exist if there was no occupation. I mean, once the occupation is there, then the resistant movements will be there as well. The minute you remove the occupation, there will no longer need for any resistant movements. So this is the beginning, and we have to understand this. As for the region, of course, as you can see everywhere, I mean, we are talking about the Gulf, who is also touched by this, and of course, the Israel hope for a better relation with Saudi Arabia. Seems far away, far at least before the summit or before after the Israeli attacks on the Band of Gaza. So we have to take the whole picture together. The Palestinian issue is the heart of every Arab country. Even the ones who are the most friends with Israel are having a problem with swallowing what's going on from even a humanitarian point of view. I think we should be working more, because the West didn't understand this so far. I have here to hand it to Israel. They did good work. It's for the first time in history that we're seeing that the oppressor, the occupier, is the one asking for his right to defend itself. This is unprecedented in the history, and I think if you look at it, it's really bizarre that the occupier is the one asking for the right to defend itself, although throughout history it was always the occupied people who are asking for the right to self-determination and to defend themselves against the aggressor. So Israel managed to convince the world that although it is the strong power in the region and the strong power over the Palestinian and the occupation power, they managed to make them believe that it needs a right to defend itself, which is absurd, I see it.
Ambassador Meligy, now, a few days ago, Egypt hosted the Summit for Peace in Cairo, talking about a suggested roadmap for peace, ceasefire, negotiations. Now, President Sisi, our foreign minister, many Arab leaders, they've all been reiterating that the real solution for this would be a two-state solution, which is a solution that has been on the table for decades now. Now, how come, or what would be the suggested roadmap by Cairo to end the escalation and have a permanent ceasefire? And why would they accept now a two-state solution since the escalation took place in on the 7th of October, even though they didn't really lend an ear to such a proposition for decades now? Is it more feasible now?
Well, once again, I think the opportunity of being a former ambassador and not an acting ambassador, so I can speak a little bit freely, I think that the two-state solution is vanishing. I mean, where is it going to be now? And the Israeli who never wanted it and never accepted it, with right wing after right wing taking over in the government in Israel, and extremists. I mean, we've seen ministers, official ministers, calling the Gazans animals. We've heard this. And yet everybody is, I mean everybody in the West, is still supporting Israel and its cause to defend itself. So we have to make sure here of one point. The two-state solution is the hope for everyone. But you have to have two players who wants the same result, who wants the same end. Israel on one side and the Palestinian on the other side. We've had the Palestinian long before Hamas. Hamas existed a few years ago, but the PLO existed long before that, and they were the one who signed the Oslo Accords. What did happen since? In this period between Oslo Accord, the signing of Oslo Accord, and the creation of Hamas or any other military group or paramilitary group in Gaza or elsewhere. In this period of time, did we ever see an Israeli government who is really ready for the concessions for peace? Never, not once. They have a very good lip service that they want the two-state solution and they will work on two-state solution, but actually they are doing the exact opposite. You cannot be serious about having the two-state solution and you are expanding your colonies, your settlements, and you are confiscating land from the Palestinians, and you are confiscating water resources from Palestinians and adding it to you, and you are making a wall. All this, and you want to convince anyone in the world that Israel is really serious about the two-state solution? I cannot see that. At least the action of Israel does not show that. Maybe they really want it, but what they are doing is totally the opposite. And I think that once they will recognize the right of the Palestinians, well, first of all, they have to stop calling them animals. And then they have to sit with them to talk about how can we make this two-state solution work. Israel is the first country in the whole world who would accept the one-state solution. But what they are doing is pushing the whole world towards the one-state solution. And if Egypt is really concerned and Egypt really means it about having the two-state solution, actually the president have said it several times, but I want to mention that a lot of countries in the West as well as in other parts of the world, in Asia, in the East, everywhere, they are saying this and they don't really know how to do it or if it is really feasible. It's just that everybody is saying the two-state solution, so they are just following the two-state solution. But do you really know that with what Israel is doing, we are vanishing this two-state solution? We are killing it. How will Israel sit now after all these massacres, all these, and they can say it, war crimes? What's going on is a war crime. Yes, I will admit that Hamas have gone against the international law. But is putting the Palestinian in the situation where they are is not against the international law, is occupying the Palestinian territory since over 50 years now, is not against the international law, is cutting the electricity and water supplies and fuel and everything else, is not against international law, is taking Palestinians and putting them in prison without any judgment. Isn't this international? I mean, the list is so long that we will need another program beside this one to say the things that Israel have done against the international law. And this is not my point of view or the one of Egypt. This is the world international view, the United Nations international view. And we have to explain to Israel that this is not even good for Israel itself. But Israel is insisting on baking the cake and eat it too. They want to take the land and have the peace too. We've heard it before, and I think this has always been on their mind, which is peace for peace. You remember the principle that we started everything with, which is land for peace? No, Israel have said back then, peace for peace. And this is what they are working for, peace for peace. If you are peaceful, I will just let you where I want to leave you, not where you have the right to. The right is known for everybody. It's the frontiers of Palestine in the 4th of June, 1967. These are the borders that we all recognize and we all know. And you will not find any leader who would accept any less.
Mr. Ambassador, now you've mentioned how Israel is pushing for a one-state solution and they're really pushing for the deportation.
Their action is pushing, but they are not. They hate it. They don't want it.
Well, they're trying. I mean, if Gazans are moving to Egypt, which is something the president and every Egyptian, as you've mentioned, said, well, this is not really an option. So it puts both in a deadlock, the Egyptian side against the Israeli side, with the whole international community divided really between both sides. So this is the time when the Egyptian diplomacy is really put to the test. So what is the general strategy of Egypt's policy and foreign relations? How are they going to deal with this sort of dilemma that has been going on for almost 2 weeks now?
Yes, well, first of all, I want to mention that you have to have a political will for all the parties concerned. Egypt is trying its best, but as you mentioned, we can reach a deadlock. Now, actually, we are in a deadlock. When the conference in Egypt took place, of all parties concerned, what happened is that they couldn't agree on a text, and Israel was not even there. So we have to speak with all parties concerned who can pressure Israel. But for the sake of God, how can you talk to someone if they are really convinced? I mean, how can I convince West Europe, the permanent member of the Security Council is, of course, beside China and Russia? How can I convince them to ask Israel that it has to withdraw and it has to stop the killing and the massacres of Palestinians for the time being? I mean, if we are talking about 1,000 Israeli, we have exceeded 5 times the number now. I mean, aren't we above 5,000 Palestinian killed? So you've taken your revenge 5 times more. What more do you want? When will you stop? When will this stop? No, it will not stop before they totally annihilate Gaza. And unfortunately, diplomacy doesn't have much work here, because you have an army that has been enraged against the Palestinians because of the humiliation they felt the 7th of October. And not to forget that a lot of politicians in Israel, their future depend on how they are going to handle this. The current government is in a real corner and bad situation. We've seen on TV that there are a lot of demonstration against the government in the TV, and it's not because they're killing too many Palestinians, it's because they failed to protect the Israelis the 7th of October. And the government need to take the edge of itself, so what they are doing is more and more killing. So the Palestinian is paying the price of the internal failure of the Israeli politics. This is what the Palestinians are paying now. The government can only survive as long as it keeps killing Palestinians. But for how long this is going to last? And why do you have always to put the name of Egypt in any solution? You are the occupying force. We are not the occupying force. We are a country that you with us have defined our borders, and we know our borders exactly. So don't mix up in this. This is your mess. This is your mess because of the occupation and not because of what happened the 7th of October. What happened the 7th of October was a mere result and consequence for what have been happening for so many long. And I want to elaborate on this, if you permit me, for 1 minute.
Please.
There are so many things that the international world, the international community cannot see. I mean, the humiliation, the daily humiliation, it's not a quantitative thing that you can measure, but there is daily humiliation for Palestinians. There is daily segregation. There is a state of apartheid. There is a lot of things regarding their education, regarding their daily life, regarding things that the world doesn't really pay attention for. But when there are clashes and when there are military operations, that's when the world starts to look. And they start to see it from this point, because all what's before, all the humiliation of the Palestinian people throughout the months and the years, this haven't been seen. And this is maybe our role. We have to show it more. We have to make them understand that living as a Palestinian on your own land, whether we are talking about the West Bank or we are talking about Gaza, is not livable for anyone with a decent human thinking.
Yes.
So the idea is that it is not about just the military action. Things do not start when the military action. But try to imagine the humiliation on a daily basis. Try to imagine women giving birth to their children on cross lines and on barriers done by the Israeli anywhere they want, anytime they want. And this is a constant humiliation, and nobody see this really. They start seeing when there is the reaction. What we've been seeing are reaction, whether we are talking about any Arab country or the Palestinians themselves. We would never have think of attacking Israel unless it is a reaction to what Israel has been doing. So please, the whole world, they have to stop taking the things from when we start.
Yes.
And when I say we, I mean here the Palestinian today. When they start to attack. This is an end result. It is not the beginning of things.
Yes. And in spite of all that, still a big part of the international community is silent, and the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip continued. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Gaza has reported heavy Israeli strikes across the territory, including the southern areas where Israel had told Palestinians to seek refuge and shelter. The death toll exceeded 5,000 in Gaza, most of them women and children. Israel's military has claimed that it is striking Hamas members and installations, but does not target civilians. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said Washington was sending additional air defense systems to the Middle East and putting more troops on prepare to deploy orders. There are growing expectations of a ground offensive that Israel says would be aimed at rooting out Hamas. Israel said it doesn't plan to take long-term control over the small but densely populated Palestinian territories. Israel has vowed to crush Hamas but has given few details about what it envisions for Gaza if it succeeds. Last Friday, Hamas freed its first captives, an American woman and her teenage daughter. Israel says Hamas is still holding at least 210 hostages, though their conditions and if they are even alive remains unknown. Israel had insisted no aid would enter Gaza until Hamas released all the captives. But with pressure from Egypt, Israel agreed to allow humanitarian aid to enter the territory. Following a phone call between President al-Sisi and U.S. President Joe Biden, Israel agreed that the humanitarian aid enter Gaza from Rafah's crossing. Biden said the United States remains committed to ensuring that civilians in Gaza will continue to have access to food, water, medical care and other assistance without diversion. The border crossing between Egypt and Gaza opened Saturday to let a trickle of desperately needed aid into the besieged Palestinian territory for the first time since Israel sealed it off and began pounding with airstrikes. As convoys of 8 trucks entered the Rafah crossing from the Egyptian side to Gaza, witnesses reported a blast and ambulance sirens on the border earlier. Israel's military said one of its tanks accidentally hit an Egyptian position near the border with the Gaza Strip. Several Egyptian border guards sustained injuries after being hit by fragments of an Israeli tank shell. Israel's defense forces expressed sorrow regarding the attack, which is being investigated. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant laid out a 3-stage plan in which airstrikes and maneuvering would aim to root out Hamas before a period of lower intensity mop-up operations. Then a new security regime would be created in Gaza, along with the removal of Israel's responsibility for life in the Gaza Strip.
With Ambassador Meligy. Your Excellency, now on the topic, now as you've mentioned, Egypt is the name that's been called upon by all international media, all world leaders, delegations, prime ministers, leaders meeting and calling President Sisi regarding the conflict. Even yesterday we saw the US Senate, a high-level delegation from Republicans and Democrats from the US Senate coming to meet the president, even though President Sisi made the stance very clear. Now, what are they proposing? What are they offering? What do they want to know? Because obviously they wouldn't be wanting to know the updates on the situation there. They can follow it.
Well, first of all, I mean, there were many reports, and I believe they were true, that even President Biden failed to convince the Israelis that they have to respect the international law with their bombardment of Gaza. And it seems that they were so provoked by what happened, as I mentioned before, the 7th of October, that they insisted that they would have to wipe Gaza out. The idea of wiping Gaza out, then there is no one else to turn to except Egypt. And this is why everybody is trying to see what Egypt's role is going to be in this. And I see Egyptian role in 2 things. First of all, to defend its own borders. And I believe that this should be our first task, is to defend our own borders from any aggression, from any intrusion. And the second thing is to continue our talks with all the parties concerned. And this is the only thing we can do. But as I mentioned before, in order to speak, you have to have someone to listen. And in order to speak with the Israelis, they have to be listening. The Israelis at this point, they are not ready to listen to anything. So the idea is that with all goodwill, not just from Egypt, we will say from the international community, from the whole world, if Israel is not ready to accept, and it has already the unlimited support of the West, when will it stop? And will it ever stop before doing what they want to do? But now we have to talk about logistics. Where will those Palestinians go? I mean, how many are they going to kill more? I mean, are they going to reach 20, 30,000? We are talking about 1.5 million or 2 million in Gaza. They cannot kill all of them. So what will they do? At a certain point, they have to stop. I think Egypt's role, or anybody's role, is to try to stop this before more people are dead. And before more vengeance feelings are inside the Palestinians, which will create another attack maybe later on. We don't want this. Egypt doesn't want this, and nobody in the world wants this. We want peace in the region. But in order to have peace in the region, as I said from the beginning, and they will keep saying it until the end, we have to end the occupation. We have to start working for this 2-state solution, if it will ever work. But it will need from Israel that it understands. Israel insists that the solution for it is to be able to accomplish what it wants without having to pay the price.
Sir, you've mentioned the priorities for Egypt, protecting their borders, talking to all parties, but is there a role to be played by countries such as Russia or China or the Gulf countries? Can they play some sort of a role, have some sort of an influence regarding the conflict in Gaza? Can they pressure the West? Can they pressure Israel into at least sitting down, having a ceasefire?
Well, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I don't think so. And it's quite clear why. I mean, if the Americans themselves failed to convince the Israelis that they have to have limit for this aggression, for these attacks, for these maneuvers, whatever you want to call it. And they couldn't. And so far, we didn't see that Israel is trying to stop or to halt. So do you think that a country that is considered, well, not a friendly country, let's say like Russia? Why? Because, as you know, Israel is supporting Ukraine, and Ukraine supported Israel, so definitely Russia is the opponent, so they will not have the same kind of support from Russia. So they will not listen to the Russians. They will listen only to the Americans if they want to listen. Mm-hmm. So the idea of having other countries try to convince, it has to be collective. It has to be collective. We've seen a few days ago, if the United States really wanted to stop this, they wouldn't have vetoed the United Nations resolution, and not that just them. Mm-hmm. Don't forget that 3 countries vetoed it. Mm-hmm. It was the United States and the United Kingdom and France. The 3 of them voted. So who are they going to listen to if the superpowers and the strongest people now in the world are supporting Israel in its aggression to the point that they don't want to blame it in any way by UN resolution that actually Israel can just throw in the garbage as it did with many before?
Mr. Ambassador, one final question, because we only have 30 seconds. Is there a role for the public opinion to play in actually any sort of developments regarding this issue, public opinion?
Yes, there is a role that we have to spread everything we see. The Western public have to see the atrocities committed by the Israelis. We have to keep pushing in this side, because this is the only thing we have, because we can't change the media support for Israel. So at least let's try to have, of course, we know that the social platforms are closed. Whenever you are talking about Hamas or talking about the Palestinian, they just block it. But we have to keep on sending to all the people we know and from all over the world to explain to them the real picture of what's going on there. There are people being killed, and we have to stop the killing.
Ladies and gentlemen, definitely developments are taking place by the minute, as you can tell, and obviously we're going to be following all of it on Nile International, but unfortunately that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, His Excellency Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister and our former Ambassador in Cameroon. Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henia Saif. Thank you for joining us.